Hey guys, RC Peck with Fearless Wealth. One of the things that people often talk about is leadership. And the idea comes up a lot in running businesses. And does a business have a good leader? Does it not have a good leader? Jack Welch is a name that people used a lot in the 90s. People talked about how he was such an amazing leader for GE. But I'm not going to pick on Jack Welch. He's too easy of a target. I'm going to pick on Steve Ballmer. So Steve Ballmer led Microsoft basically between 2000 to the beginning of 2014. And I want to talk about that leadership, and then I want to pivot into gold and silver and talk about leadership there, not just with precious metals, but just leadership in general of owning assets that are leading the market. So let's look at Microsoft. So Steve Ballmer came in at the left blue line and left at the right blue line. and the company went nowhere, or at least the price went nowhere during his 14-year reign of Microsoft. So kind of a failed leader, probably got overpaid. And then when he left, you can see that the stock broke above its old high when he took over, and he left, I think, in February of 14. So if we go with February 14, the stock went up 470%. And from him starting January 2007 to February 14th, we can actually measure this. The stock went down about 14%. So you can basically say Steve Ballmer was a failed leader of Microsoft. It gets even worse if you take Microsoft and you divide it by the S&P 500. You take 2000 here, and he left in 14 here. And so relative to the S&P, it fell 45% of its value. You should have just bought the S&P. So let's talk about leadership here. And I want to talk about gold, or let's continue to talk about leadership. And here's a price chart of GLD. And actually, let's just put in the price of actual gold right here. Now, I'm not saying gold is pulling the market higher or leading the market higher, because gold is its own sub asset class. But it is leading. It is leading higher. It has been leading higher since August of 2018. So about 20-ish months, it's been moving higher. And even if you look at this right here, this is the 20 months I'm talking about with it moving higher. You have this very erratic, violent price move down. By itself, it's 12%, and it doesn't look that bad. But visually, it looks bad. But if you consider that gold fell 12% while the S&P fell 34%, you start to think, wow, that had a lot of stability relative to the stock market. One of the problems with gold has been people looking at silver, and silver has not shown leadership. In fact, it's kind of been flat and dead. I need to zoom out to show you what I'm talking about. But if you look at silver, it's kind of just gone sideways for, let's just count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's call it 6 years it's gone sideways. And if you go way back to 2013, man, it just can't, this $19 an ounce, it's had a really big problem with. So silver's been just in this big messy messness of sidewaysness. And during the COVID correction, it broke below its $14 an ounce, certainly cleaned people out, got immediately back on its feet, and it's now moving its way through just the messiness of that kind of that $14 to $19 a share. So it's definitely reestablished its strength. It's still in the noise and the confusion of the sidewaysness between those two blue lines. But a big price for this is going to be $19, not the biggest price, because if I show you kind of the range around the $19 here, you can see it couldn't break above that in 19, couldn't break above it in 20. Same thing with 17, same thing with 16. It did try to break above it. It broke above it, and then it failed and broke back down. So certainly silver breaking above 19 is going to be a big deal. And what we see happening in precious metals is, kind of one by one, gold breaking out, GDXJ breaking out, GDX breaking out, GDXJ, I believe, is about to break out. And really the last remaining part of this asset class, or this, I call it a sub asset class, guys, because really there's only 4 asset classes. And the one gold's part of is they're part of commodities, and they're part of the sub asset class called metals, and they're part of the sub asset class called precious metals. But precious metals have woken up, and the lagger has been silver. And it's very likely that silver is going to go back and test that $19 and break above it. And then once it does fully break above the 19, it's going to want to get back to this $27 a share, whether that's 27 or 28. I like to give zones and not specific prices. But after it breaks 19, it's really going to want to just get back to that $28, $29 an ounce. And then from there, it's going to just keep moving up through resistance. The next major resistance it's going to want to work through is about a $35 an ounce. And then once it moves through that, it's going to start looking at the $50 an ounce. So we talk about leadership, and I used Steve Ballmer to start this conversation off because I'm looking at the price chart of Microsoft and Microsoft relative to the S&P to say he was not a good leader. You could have put your money in the S&P and it would have grown much better with much less volatility and much more reward. So clearly, based on the tens or hundreds of millions of people who bought and sold Microsoft over the 14-year reign of Ballmer, they clearly were like, this is not the place for our money. And that's why it never broke higher, and in fact underperformed the S&P. And so I love the idea of leadership to ask yourself, what's going higher? What's leading higher? Not necessarily leading the stock market higher or leading commodities higher, because gold is not leading commodities higher. If I pull up a price chart of the commodity complex right here, you can clearly see the commodity complex is not moving higher. It's actually kind of collapsed, mostly because energy makes up about 55% of the commodity complex. So when I talk about leadership, it just really means leadership of strength. Where's the strength in where you can put your money, right? That's what I want you to think about more, and to find the places where there's the leadership of strength. And silver is starting to, again, I call this the clean out. Really, it's going to get interesting. Silver's $1.50 from $19. And the way it's moving right now, I believe it's going to have a pretty strong move through $19. And that's probably going to accelerate the whole precious metal move higher. So guys, this is just another step in helping you take back control, get that clarity, get that consistency, get that certainty. And if you notice, a lot of this is done with your eyes open, looking at price charts. There's a lot of nuances to this, but this is just a little bite of showing you how to get more of that control and that clarity back in your life. And if you like this, you're going to love my portfolio x-ray. And that's where we sit down and actually look at your symbols. And I point out to you where your Steve Ballmer investments are and where your gold-like investments are. So if you're interested in that, go over to fearlesswealth.com/x-ray, or there will be a link at the top of the comments. Thanks, guys. Please go ahead and subscribe for this if you like this. If there's something you don't like, if you have a commentary, please let me know. Be kind. Kindness is an absolute strength. And just leave a comment and I read them. And if there's something you want me to cover or something I might not be seeing with silver or Steve Ballmer, just let me know and we can have a good conversation about it. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Bye.